The year was 1977. The country was restless. Gas shortages, strikes, and protests were everywhere. But for the small town of Ashwood, Pennsylvania, Labor Day weekend was supposed to be the last great hurrah of summer. Families flocked to barbecues, kids swam in quarry lakes, and the smell of grilled corn hung thick in the late August air. But that year, the holiday wouldn't end with fireworks. It would end in blood. 4 friends, Julie, Steve, Corinne, and Tommy, were college kids home for the long weekend. They weren't interested in family cookouts or parades. Instead, they wanted something different, something they'd always been warned about. The old Ashwood labor camp. The camp had been shut down years earlier after a deadly strike in the steel mill. Workers claimed unfair pay and brutal conditions, and on Labor Day of 1965, violence erupted. Shots were fired. Several Union men were killed. The camp never reopened. Locals whispered that the place was cursed, haunted by the ghosts of the men who never got justice. For most people, it was a ghost story. For Julie and her friends, it was the perfect place to party. They drove out in Steve's old Chevy Nova, windows down, Fleetwood Mac on the radio. The road wound deeper into the Pennsylvania woods, where the remnants of old Union housing still stood. The camp was nothing but rotting wooden cabins and rusting machinery. The gates were chained, but Tommy had brought bolt cutters. With a grin, he snapped the lock. "Happy Labor Day," he laughed, stepping inside. The group carried beer, a radio, and sleeping bags. They set up in the main hall, a cavernous building where faded Union. Posters still hung on the walls. Workers of the world unite. Torn and yellowed by time, as night fell, they built a fire in an old barrel. The radio played cheap disco hits. For a moment, the old camp didn't feel so bad, until the noises started. At first, it was just branches snapping. Then came the sound of heavy boots on gravel. Steve thought it was raccoons. Corinne wasn't so sure. Julie swore she saw a shadow move just outside the circle of firelight, tall, broad-shouldered, watching ... They laughed it off, cracked open another beer, and tried to ignore the chill crawling up their spines. But when the fire died down, they realized they weren't alone. Nailed to the inside wall of the hall, hidden under a peeling poster, was a rusted Union hard hat. Dried blood still stained the brim. "Probably from the riots," Steve muttered, trying to sound brave. But Julie couldn't shake the feeling that someone had placed it there. As a warning, It started with the radio. The music warped, static hissing through the speakers. Then, instead of disco, a man's voice came through. "You forgot us. You left us to die." The friends stared, frozen. The voice was low, broken, filled with rage. And then the power cut out. In the dark, Tommy screamed. When the others lit their flashlights, he was gone. His beer still sat on the floor, foaming over. They searched frantically, calling his name. Then they saw it. Drag marks in the dirt leading toward the machine yard. Against the steel press, Tommy's body was pinned upright. His chest had been crushed, ribs jutting out like splintered wood. His eyes were wide, mouth frozen in a silent scream. The group bolted toward the car, but the Nova's tires were slashed. In the driver's seat sat another hard hat, dripping fresh blood. They were trapped. The killer was real. Not a ghost, not a story. Someone was hunting them, Corinne suggested hiding until morning, but Steve grabbed a pipe, swearing he'd find the bastard himself. He stormed off into the dark while the girls trailed behind. That's when they heard the whistle, a sharp, metallic steel mill whistle, but the factory had been dead for a decade. The sound echoed through the woods, loud and piercing. Steve barely had time to turn before a massive figure emerged from the shadows. The killer wore a blood-stained Union jumpsuit and a dented welding mask. In his hand was a rusted pickaxe, jagged and sharp. Steve swung the pipe, but the man caught it mid-swing, wrenched it free, and buried the pickaxe into Steve's throat. Blood sprayed as Steve gurgled, collapsing into the dirt. The girls screamed and ran. Julie and Corinne sprinted through the camp, weaving between decaying cabins. The killer's boots thundered behind them, the whistle shrieking again and again. They ducked inside an old bunkhouse. Dust and cobwebs choked the air. They huddled behind a row of bunks, holding their breath. For a moment, silence. Then, clang, the pickaxe slammed into the metal bed frame, inches from Julie's face. They bolted again. Corinne wasn't fast enough. The killer caught her by the hair, yanked her back, and drove the pickaxe into her chest. She gasped once, blood bubbling at her lips before falling limp. Julie didn't look back. Julie ran until her lungs burned. She stumbled into the union office, the very place where the strike had been. Called in 65, old banners still hung above the podium, and there on the wall she saw it, a faded photo of the steel workers. Every face was familiar. Every man looked like the killer. Julie realized the truth. The killer wasn't one man. He was all of them and angry. Vengeful spirit born from the blood spilled on Labor Day. The whistle blew again. The killer stepped into the office, towering in the doorway. Julie grabbed a lighter and a can of old paint thinner, hurling the liquid across the floor. The killer charged. She sparked the lighter. The office exploded in flames. Julie dove through a broken window, glass slicing her arms. Behind her, the inferno consumed the building. The whistle shrieked one final time, before being drowned by the roar of fire. Dawn broke over Ashwood. Julie limped down the road, her skin burned, her clothes torn. A pickup truck slowed, the driver rolling down the window. "You need help, miss?" Julie opened her mouth to answer, but then she froze. On the truck's passenger seat sat a Union hard hat. Fresh blood dripped down its brim. The driver grinned. "Happy Labor Day."